So I'm sitting with Greg Zachary. We've just had a very interesting
Oh,
2
you
days.
got it rolling, huh?
Yeah, two
it
days
just rolls
of
on its own.
intercultural discussion. But you're living a very intercultural life. In fact, that's your new book.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking, Peter. I appreciate your interest. I've got a book coming out called Married to Africa, about my marriage to an African. And it's both a sort of personal exploration of a personal journey and also about intercultural relations at a very personal level.
How does your wife feel about being the subject of your latest work?
Well, you know, I didn't ask her permission. When you marry a writer, you got to think he's going to write about things. And so I did choose to write about our relationship. A lot of it's an adventure story. Some of it's about her encounter with America. So it's kind of an immigrant story in a way, a new American story about how an African confronts the United States. Some of it is about a white and black who are married and how they meet in Africa and come to America. It's very much a soap opera-ish kind of study where it's chronological and does move back and forth in time, but it's really a love story. It's called Married to Africa, a love story. It really is about love and its trials and tribulations.
Well, so much of your work has revolved around Africa. Now, it sounds to me like this has been an opportunity for you to look at your own country and your own background through a new lens. And what is that?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't really delve deeply into social questions. It's really a personal story. Much of my work is sociological and has about political economy, but here, whether of an international or the U.S., and it's about multicultural identity and political, economic, and innovation, the way all these interact. But this is really meant to be a personal story about the life of the heart, because so many experiences for me when I confront otherness is really on a very personal human level. I don't think abstractions are a good basis to build general, understanding or general links between people. So this is just meant to be a story of two very different people that have ups and downs, and there's some novelty in it because obviously white men marrying black women is still pretty rare in the U.S., but we don't deal with race in a direct way. I think there's some good things about that. I'm not an expert on race, and neither is my wife. we happen to be black and white, but we also are drawn to each other because of our blackness and her blackness and my whiteness. There's something that draws us together. We're not afraid to accept that, and we accept the consequences of that.
You talk very openly about issues that kind of make some people kind of squirm. And whatnot. So I think it's really interesting that you're so upfront about how you deal with
Yeah, although
issues.
again, in the book itself, the stories, there's a chapter called Jew Meets Juju, in which my mother gets over her initial resistance to my wife, who's called Chizo in the book. So Chizo charms my mother in the end, who begins as a skeptic, a very hard-nosed, depression-surviving woman who's pretty much alienated any other woman I've ever been with. She's broken them down through her relentless character. But my Nigerian wife is able to somehow deflect and diffuse a lot of these things. And there's a kind of touching scene about how my mother, Chizo, decides that she's just not going to fail another driving test. She's just going to drive without a license. Even though I've advised against this, and even though I am terrified she'll have an accident and I'll be sued and lose a lot of money, she one night throws me out of the car, leaves me alone on a street, drives away, and after that she never has me in the car again. She just drives without a license. So I call my mom and I get her to come out, and she's Chizo's cover for driving. And so she's always in the car with my wife, and finally she does pass the test. She does recognize that certain overspeeding, these loopy left turns that look like an imitation of a drunk driver, that these things are fire failures when you take the test. And we get her a new driving instructor, and she finally passes. And so, race and ethnicity and immigration and the mainstream culture, it's all embedded in these stories, but it's not explicit. There's this very funny tale where we live initially in the U.S. next to my ex-wife. In fact, right behind her in the backyard.
Okay, this now sounds like a Hollywood script in the making. So,
yeah.
So who's going to
so
play
we
you
live
in the movie?
Backyard, and my wife's family in Nigeria, the last thing you do in an African family is, if you've divorced someone, is live near them. You should be afraid they'll kill you. So my wife, her family in Nigeria is always praying all the time. They're holding special prayer meetings, the entire church, praying that my wife, that Chizo, doesn't get killed by my former wife. So
It's worked so far.
it's worked so far, good point. Yeah, and I of course tried to allay their concerns, but they kept on praying. Then one day, Chizo, in an act of generosity towards my ex-wife, decides to trim the shrubs in the front yard. There's a fecund garden in the front of the house, explosive growth of different plants, and with a machete that she brought from Africa, not a precision tool, she hacked away for hours. And I remember showing up near the end of the carnage and just horrified said to her, "What have you done?" And she just genuinely thought she was helping my ex-wife. Well, she was not. And so, but through this encounter, because in the bush in Africa, you would slaughter the bush with your machete and the bush would grow back. Because that's what Chizo kept saying, is it will grow back. Meanwhile, it did look like someone had taken a machete to your garden and chopped it to bits. So my ex-wife, Nora, came to the door. And frankly, and they did bond through this tragedy. But before that, Nora would send back food, cookies, things like that, sometimes for my own kids. And Chizo would never eat it, again, afraid of being poisoned. So, it's meant to be lighthearted tales about a subject that a lot of people think is heavy. Race relations in the U.S., intermarriage. It's too late to present these subjects in a ponderous way. There's been many intermarriages. They're rising in the U.S., black-white marriages in particular I'm talking about. Because I'm from the old school. I'm still very much thinking that America has to come to grips with black-white relations. I understand, I live in California, I certainly understand there's plenty of people from China, India, certainly Mexico. And so that diversity means something very different. But I'm of a generation that grew up with Martin Luther King's assassination and trying to heal the racial divide. And so, in a sense, this is like a last discharge. Because for people of my generation, and I think Obama in his candidacy has shown it, that many whites are still very uncomfortable with blacks, and blacks with whites. And the Reverend Wright episode, if anything, shows that black people, when they're alone, make a lot of fun of white people. Maybe they really don't dislike us, but there's a lot of tension that they have to vent. And my wife herself will say things like, "You whites," when she's run across something that's objectionable to her, She's so it's a way of trying to do a contemporary version of a different type of interracial marriage. Obviously, she's African, I'm American. And it's easier in a way because we're crossing cultures, not this family feud in the U.S.
Married to Africa, when's it going to be out?
Well, it's coming from Scribner, which is a very nice publisher. They published Hemingway, but it'll be out after the election.
Okay.
I think if Obama wins, maybe the book will get more attention. If he loses, we'll just forget all about Obama. But it's going to come out around Christmas.
Excellent.
In December. But it'll be a book officially for January 2009.
Fantastic.
Thanks a lot, Peter.
Thanks
Let me
very
talk
much.
about it. Welcome.